Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amita Rari, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel and Gaza agreeing to ceasefire after over 100 rockets being fired at the Israeli south. Meantime, Foreign Minister Eli Cohen in the European Union working on an Israel-European Union summit for later this year. And later, just weeks after the murder of Lucy Dee, the bereaved Dee family meeting with organ transplant recipients receiving her organs. After a day-long flare-up, Israel and Gaza terror groups agreed to a ceasefire this morning. The terrorists fired over 100 rockets and mortars towards Israel in the 24-hour period, and ILTV Steve Leibovich has the story.
The latest round of clashes between Israel and Gaza terror groups began shortly after the announced death of Islamic Jihad's Khader Adnan in prison after an 86-day hunger strike. At first, 4 rockets were fired from Gaza, causing no injuries. In response, IDF tanks struck a Hamas observation post near the border. The terrorists renewed fire, and a rocket hit a construction site in Sderot, seriously wounding a 25-year-old foreign national and lightly wounding 2 others. In the evening hours, Gaza terrorists fired dozens of rockets and mortar shells into Israel. Most were intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense system, landed in open areas, or fell short and landed inside Gaza. 5 hit urban areas in southern Israel. Overnight, the Air Force responded forcefully, carrying out airstrikes against terrorist targets, hitting a Hamas training camp, a concrete production plant, and a tunnel used by Hamas in southern Gaza. Explosions were heard across northern and central Gaza. The army said the strikes deal a serious blow to Hamas's ability to fortify and arm itself. The 2 sides reportedly agreed to a truce before dawn. According to foreign reports, the agreement was mediated by officials from Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations. The truce was apparently broken briefly when the warning system went off in the community of Nir Am, but was quickly restored. Early this morning, the army said that after a situational assessment, it had decided that those living in communities bordering the Strip could return to their usual routines. Israel and Gaza terror groups have repeatedly waged brief, back-and-forth battles across the border in recent years. The exchanges vary in duration and intensity. There have also been more severe and longer conflicts, including the last in 2021, when Israel launched Operation Guardian of the Walls.
And joining us now for the latest security updates is former head of the military's prosecution office for Judea and Samaria, Lieutenant Colonel Reserves and attorney Morris Hirsch. Morris, so this was a very brief flare-up of 24 hours in response to the death in prison of the Islamic Jihad terrorists. Over 100 rockets fired, Israeli airstrikes in response. Both sides quickly agreed to ceasefire. Did neither side really want this?
I'm not sure whether the Palestinian Islamic Jihad didn't want this. I'm sure that Israel didn't want any type of flare-up at all. It's unfortunate, really, that Israel is willing to tolerate this constant flow of missiles from the Gaza Strip, from the terrorists there. You have to take into account that every single missile fired is, under international law, the basis for a full-scale war. And Israel's very, very limited response, targeting specific areas where they see the terrorists really gaining force and preparing their forces for the next attack, is something which is very minor and should be really considered to be part of that desire of Israel to avoid a full-scale war.
Now, the Israeli response to rocket fire was once again measured sort of with a kind of tit for tat. Didn't the rocket fire this time require a more sustained Israeli response? I mean, was it bigger than what we saw lately?
Well, I think the understanding needs to be that any rocket that's fired from the Gaza Strip is a rocket that's fired with the full permission of Hamas, whether it be Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Hamas, that both are terrorist groups firing rockets. And therefore, again, as I said, in order to provide the security for Israel's civilian population, who are being indiscriminately targeted by these missiles. Something much more massive needs to be done by Israel in order to eliminate these terrorist cells and the entire terrorist infrastructure. We see the terrorists building up not only missiles, weapons, attack tunnels, while all the time complaining to the world, well, Gaza's under siege and Gaza has no humanitarian aid and the Gazan population suffers from deficiency in labor and everything else. Well, this is because the terrorists are spending their money arming themselves in order to murder Israelis rather than providing aid for the Gazan population. This is something which, unfortunately, Israel has to deal with on a constant basis. And therefore, once and for all, Israel needs to do something or forever suffer this fate of having their citizens indiscriminately targeted whenever the terrorists feel the need to attack Israel.
Well, Moritz, but that's really the main question. I mean, what has to happen here for something bigger to be done? I mean, within the coalition, there are voices saying that Israel is not doing enough to restore deterrence. What's preventing Israel from stepping up its response, for example, by targeting terrorist leaders?
Well, I think there are a number of different considerations that need to be taken into account. Obviously, when discussing Gaza, it's not all, it's not all plain and black and white, obviously. But there are a number of things that are being done all the time. For example, statistics put out by the UN, not an Israel-friendly organization at all, showed that in the first 3 months of 2023, there was an unprecedented amount of entries from the Gaza Strip into Israel of Gazans coming to work and to bring home money. This is something which should be leveraged more against the terrorists in Gaza. For every rocket that's fired, that's another month when Gazans will not be allowed into Israel. There's no reason why Israel should freely allow the access of Gazans into Israel to work and to receive goods. Most of the goods going into the Gaza Strip pass through the Israeli crossings. The lie of Gaza being under siege, of Israel preventing the transfer of aid and of other goods, just simply isn't true. All you need to do is, again, look at the website of OCHA, the UN organization dealing with Israel and Gaza, and you can see the statistics clearly there. All of these measures should be considered part of the arsenal of weapons of Israel to use in order to ensure that the terrorists in Gaza understand that it simply does not pay to attack Israel. If you attack Israel, you will suffer. Not because we want the Gazans to suffer, but because we will not tolerate the fact that you are attacking our civilians with the goal of murdering them just simply indiscriminately.
Moritz, these are some very strong words there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the updates.
Thank you very much.
Residents of Sderot and communities in the area around the Gaza Strip once again finding themselves rushing to bomb shelters within minutes, dealing with this harsh reality once again.
אני באתי מפה, אני רואה פה מלא עשן. בא לפתוח את השער, אני לא יכולה. כי מכל האבנים, כן, זה היה דלת נהיה... וזהו, ואני התחלתי לרוץ פה, לצרוח, פשוט לצרוח. תעזרו לי, הילדים שלי בבית ויש לי קסאם בחצר.
Residents of Sderot finding themselves once again in a terrifying reality after being hit by rocket strikes from Gaza on Tuesday. The rockets were fired into Israel after Palestinian prisoner Khadar Adnan died in Israeli prison following an 87-day hunger strike. A total of 104 rockets were fired into Israel between Tuesday and Wednesday, most by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, with some minor participation from Hamas, the IDF confirmed on Wednesday morning. In response, Israel countered with approximately 16 airstrikes, mostly on Hamas positions firing the rockets. Sderot Mayor Alon Davidi, who participated just a week and a half ago in a special cabinet meeting in his city, called on the political echelon to act and restore peace to Gaza border region, saying it's time to stop mincing words. If there are clear and known goals, we must act and take care of them. With this being said, police heads in the city also trying to restore the calm.
אנחנו ממשיכים להיערך פה להמשך היום, שהמטרה שלנו פה זה לשמור על תחושת הביטחון ולתת מענה טוב ויעיל לתושבים.